very beautiful morning to our distinguished guests, our dear staff, and students of this great institution. This morning, we'd like to specially welcome you to the University of Benin. We pride ourselves as Unibest. Greatest Uniben. No, in Uniben we say greatest. Every other university is great, but here we are greatest. Greatest Uniben. Greatest Uniben. All right, thank you very much. On behalf of our dear Vice Chancellor, Professor Friday Faraday Orumwense, we'd like to specially welcome you to the third Eminent lecture series of our great institution, holding on this day, 22nd of May, 2019. Ladies and gentlemen, please, the Governor of Edo State and his entourage and the guest lecturer, may we all rise as we welcome the Executive Governor of Edo State, Governor Godwin Norelase Obaseki, the Wake and See Governor, and our lecturer for today, the Governor of Central Bank of Nigeria, Mr. Godwin Emefiele. Also on the entourage, we have the #1 man in University of Benin, our dear Vice Chancellor, Professor Friday Faraday Orumwense, a fellow of the Nigerian Society of Engineers. On the Vice Chancellor's entourage, we have the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Administration, Professor Iparosa Saho-Omori. On that same entourage, we have the Deputy Vice Chancellor Academic, Professor Michael Asike. We have the Amiable Registrar of the University of Benin. She is Mrs. O.A. Oshodi. And the boss of our great institution, Dr. Victor Imade, and the librarian of this university, we have Dr. Luke Obasi. All right, thank you very much. Please, while we remain standing, may we take the Uniben anthem. National anthem before the Uniben anthem, please. Thank you. The Uniben anthem. Uniben! Thank you. You may have your seats.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We'd like to welcome everyone to the third Eminent lecture of the University of Benin. Greatest Uniben.
Greatest.
Greatest. This morning, ladies and gentlemen, as has been introduced to you earlier, we have in our midst this morning seated our wait and see governor. I want to add the magician governor, the man that does his things very quietly and you see the evidence. Please, I want you to join me to make welcome again to this place the number one citizen of Edo State, the executive governor of Edo State, Mr. Godwin Enogegase Obaseki. We also have on the governor's entourage this morning the Honorable Commissioner of Education, Edo State, Mr. Emmanuel Agbale. Barrister Emmanuel Agbale. Also, we have a foremost engineer in our midst, a dynamic administrator, someone who ensures that things go well and go smoothly daily in the running of a university system like this. Ladies and gentlemen, great university students, join me to make welcome the Vice Chancellor, University of Benin, Engineer Professor Friday Orumwense, Fellow, Nigerian Society of Engineers. Also, on the Vice Chancellor's entourage is the Deputy Vice Chancellor Administration, Professor Ikporosa Osahan Omoyi. We also have seated for this program and also the convener of this program, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academic, Professor Michael Emefiele Azike. We also have our mother of the university, the Registrar, O.A. Oshodi, Mrs. The man that is in charge of the university's finances, that ensures that money is doled out as a when due and used appropriately, is here in our midst. He is a doctor. Please join me to make welcome Dr. Victor Imagbe. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are not read, you will not have been in this hall this morning. The person that has read the entire books in the custody of the University of Benin is here. He is the bursar of the librarian of the university, another doctor, Dr. Luke Obasuyi. We also want to make welcome the First Lady of the university community. I'm sure many of you have not been opportune to see her, especially those of our children just coming in. This morning, ladies and gentlemen, with a very resounding and well welcome, please join me to make welcome to this place, the wife of the Vice Chancellor of the University of Benin, Mrs. Francisca Orumwense.
Thank you very much. All right, now we'd like to specially recognize those from the CBN. Ladies and gentlemen, join me welcome the Director, Monitoring Policy Department, Mr. Moses Tule. A round of applause for him. We also have in the entourage of the CBN Governor, the Director of Corporate Communications, Mr. Isaac Okozefo. We have the Director, Governor's Department, Mr. Jerry Abwe. Also in that entourage, we have the Special Advisor to the CBN Governor on Financial Markets, Mr. Emmanuel Ukeje. Also present here with us this morning, we have the Acting Director, Security Services Department, Mrs. Oluwakemi Osa Odigie. We have the essay to the CBN Governor, Mr. Innocent Isiche. We also have the branch controller of the CBN from Benin, Asaba, and Yenagoa. We would like to specially welcome you to Unibest. You're most welcome. Also, we would like to specially appreciate and recognize the presence of other executives and staff of the Central Bank of Nigeria. We are glad to have you. Welcome. Please a round of applause for them.
The protocol list is on and on. We will continue after this time so that the program can begin proper. But quickly, we want to recognize the presence of Emeritus Professor F.F.O. Ofuegu. You're welcome, sir. We are happy to have you here. We also have this morning seated in our midst the Provost College of Medical Sciences, Professor Efosa of Yasu. We also have seated this morning Senator Roland Owie. Also in our midst, we have deans, we have directors, professors, University of Benin. Please, you are highly acknowledged and you are welcome.
All right. Thank you very much. Our great Unibest students. Greatest Unibest students. All right. We are glad to have you here this morning. It is on that note, ladies and gentlemen, permits me to bring to the microphone for his welcome address, my Vice Chancellor, your Vice Chancellor. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Engineer, Professor Osase, Friday, Faraday, Orumwense. Please a round of applause for him, please, as he gives his welcome address. You can do better. That's my Vice Chancellor, handsome young man. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Your Excellency, the Governor of Edo State, Mr. Godwin Enowase Obaseki, the CBA Governor, Mr. Emefiele. Please, other protocol duly observed. It is with great pleasure that I warmly welcome you all to the third Eminent lecture series in the University of Benin. As a culture with us in the University of Benin, the achievement of academic excellence is foremost, as we ever relent in our hours as regards academic research and oral development. It is my pleasure to place on record that recently 2 research teams from the University of Benin were among the 32 winners out of the 101,800 applications received for the F.F.O grant. A lecture series such as this enables staff, students, and indeed the university community to update knowledge and skills in their areas of discipline. The University of Benin spent enormous resources in the training and retraining of staff. The Eminent lecture series of the University of Benin has had great and refined minds shared with us on various topics. We have been privileged to have as guest lecturers for the Eminent lecture series a former American ambassador to Nigeria, one who made his mark in democracy, academia, government, law, civil rights, and civil society organizations, Ambassador Walter Carrington, alongside his wife, Dr. Arase Carrington, who by all standards is a medical doctor and a public health consultant. We also had on the Eminent lecture series, a professor by all standards, an international recognized Nobel laureate, and human rights activist, Professor Wole Soyinka. On the third Eminent lecture series, we are privileged to have Mr. Godwin Emefiele, CON, an authority in the management of finances, treasury, and strategic planning. Mr. Godwin Emefiele is the first since democratic rule in 1999 to be appointed for a second tenure as the governor of the Apex Bank of Nigeria. He will be talking to us on the topic titled Beyond the Global Financial Crisis, Monetary Policy Under Uncertainty. The University of Benin is an institution poised to making regional and international obligations on sustainable development of our nations that will improve the advancement and innovation in education, health, economy, gender, policies, environmental, and technology. As the world becomes increasingly global, new ways to explore, learn, and share knowledge are urgently required. Therefore, the lecture series serves as a means to connect and engage creatively, rub mind together, and brainstorm on how to improve on capacity building. I see this opportunity to congratulate the Senate, staff and students of the University of Benin, as well as the committee that has put this together for this landslide achievement. Finally, to our guest lecturer, welcome once again to the University of Benin, here in the ancient city of Benin, the heartbeat of the nation, a land of rich cultural heritage and the home of bronze casting. I wish you a pleasant stay. It is my honor to now declare the third Eminent lecture series open. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please can we put our hands together again for Engineer Professor Faraday Osase Orumwense, a fellow of the Nigerian Society of Engineers. Quickly, we will now receive a presentation from the students of the Theatre Arts Department of this great university.
I give you white chalk, my people. I give you white chalk, my people. Every sunrise is an opportunity for us to arise and put a smile on someone's face. Today, my story centers around a great figure, a giant, a man whose grace and tenacity traverses the great entity called Nigeria. Nigeria, the giants of Africa. Our people say we should be remembered for the things we do. For the things we do, they are as important as the things we say. Today, I'm here to tell you about this great figure, this giant, this mighty man. Oh, he hails from the Ika South extraction of Delta State. No wonder the adage that no matter where the sun rises, its eminence transcends globally. This one man has stemmed the tides of irregular misappropriation of funds and has made plain the mountainous strands of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Do you agree with me? He is one man, just one man. He has, and he's still taking financial institutions to greater heights, home and abroad. I must tell you that this great man, this giant that I speak of, is currently leading monetary policies that will lead Nigeria to the sharp decline in price of the Nigerian economy. This great man, I must mention that he is a philanthropist. And he is a man of the people. Oh yes, I see in your eyes. Yes, I see in your eyes. I see in your eyes that you want to know more about this great man. You want to find out more about this great man? I will leave that to the university orator to do justice to that. Woma Baba, Obaga-tope, Woma Baba.
are students of this great university from the Department of Theatre Arts. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Just before we invite the orator of the university, please, we have the representative of the Chief Medical Director, UBTH, Professor Darlington Obaseki. He's ably represented here this morning by Professor Adeleye Omohua Adebayo. Please, a round of applause for him. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, just to let you know that you can watch these events live from our Uniben news page on news.uniben.edu. I'll take it again. You can watch it live on news.uniben.edu. Thank you.
You can start now. You can check it. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time to bring on board our eminent lecturer of the day. But first, I'd like to make welcome to the microphone the university orator and the Dean, Faculty of Arts, our very own Professor Eddie Erabi, to give a citation on our guest lecturer. Celebrate Professor Eddie Erabi till he gets to the microphone. Okay, he's making his way down to this place. I'd like to quickly recognize the presence of Professor Felix Okeme. You're welcome, sir. We also have in our midst this morning Emeritus Professor Augustine Ore.
Also, we'd like to recognize the Dean of the Faculty of Life Sciences, University of Benin, Professor Okaka. You're welcome, sir. We would also like to recognize the Vice Chancellor's Dean, that is the Dean of the Faculty of Engineering. The dynamic, my own Professor Kes Obahiago. You're welcome, sir. Also, we'd like to recognize all bank executives here present. We'll appreciate you for coming this morning. We'll also like to recognize the professor that is always spotless, Professor Achime. You're welcome, sir. Also, we'd like to recognize Professor Uhuagu. You're welcome, sir. Thank you for coming. He's the Director of Energy Center. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are still right here at the auditorium, Akindeko Auditorium of the University of Benin, for the third Eminent lecture, to be delivered by the Governor of Central Bank of Nigeria, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, CON. Our lecturer is ready for the day. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome to the microphone the orator of the University of Benin, Professor Eddie Erabi.
May I respectfully invite our guest lecturer to please stand for this introduction. The guest lecturer, please. Your Excellency, the Executive Governor of our dear state, Mr. Godwin Obaseki, our dear Vice Chancellor, Professor F.F.O. Orumwense, FNSC, our distinguished guests, principal officers of the university, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed my singular honor and cherished privilege to present to you one of Nigeria's finest citizens, an embodiment of efficiency, competence, dexterity, and deftness in management of finances. Our most distinguished achiever, a banker of international repute and intimidating accomplishments. A governor without a state. But whose influence and czarist domain surpasses the 36 states of Nigeria. The man that holds the key to the vote of Nigeria's money. A Nigerian of impeccable integrity, the newly recharged, remandated, reconfirmed, #1 gatekeeper of the nation's treasury, the one and only governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, His Excellency, since he's a governor, Godwin Emefiele, Commander of the Order of the Niger. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, this handsome and bespectacled and unquestionably a gentleman was born on the August 4th, 1961 in Lagos. Although he hails from Agbonte in the South local government area of Delta State. He had his primary school education at Government Primary School, Victoria Island, formerly Ansarudin Primary School, Igboshere, Lagos, and passed out in June 1973. He obtained his West African School certificate in June 1978 at Maryland Comprehensive Secondary School, Ikeja, Lagos. He proceeded to the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, where he obtained his Bachelor of Science BSc Second Class Honors Upper Division in Finance and Banking in June 1984. Thereafter, in October 1986, he obtained his MBA as the best graduating student in finance in the same university. He went on to deepen his knowledge of macroeconomics at Oxford University. Having obtained various qualifications and executive education studies in negotiation, strategy, leadership, and critical thinking, delivering valued profit from Harvard University, Stanford University, and the University of Pennsylvania, and Wharton Business School. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, His Excellency Godwin Emefiele is having a dreamlike but real, enviable, and illustrious career. Our distinguished lecturer of today is currently the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, a position he has held since June 2014, and just a few days ago was reconfirmed for another 5-year tenure as the henchman at the apex of the banking sector and indeed the economy of Nigeria. Prior to taking the helms at the CBN, he has spent over 27 years in commercial banking, having started his career at the Nigerian American Merchant Bank, then known as First Bank of Boston, and later joined Zenith Bank from inception in 1990. Over nearly 3 decades, and particularly at Zenith, Mr. Emefiele was an integral part of the team that transformed Zenith Bank from a start-up to one of Nigeria's largest banks with over 9,000 staff, about $3.2 billion in terms of shareholders' funds, and subsidiaries in Ghana, Sierra Leone, Gambia, South Africa, Dubai, China, and the United Kingdom. On account of his uncommon diligence, exceptional motivation, and undying integrity, he rose quickly through the ranks of the bank and was appointed executive director in 1996. In this position, Mr. Emefiele oversaw the bank's affairs in corporate banking, treasury, financial control, and strategic planning, and was later appointed deputy managing director in 2001. Indeed, Mr. Emefiele played key roles in the bank's expansion beyond Africa's shores, as Zenith became the first Nigerian bank in 25 years to be licensed by the Financial Services Authority, FSA, in the United Kingdom, UK, for the commencement of banking operations in April 2007. On August 1st, 2010, Mr. Emefiele's sojourn in commercial banking culminated in his elevation to the position of Group Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Zenith Bank PLC. Under Emefiele's leadership, Zenith Bank strengthened its position as a leading financial institution in Africa, winning recognition and endorsement at home and abroad for giant strides in key performances areas like corporate governance, service delivery, and deployment of cutting-edge ICT. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, I can say that our guest lecturer of today is a professional colleague. For before his banking career, he was a lecturer at the universities of Nigeria, Nsukka, and Port Harcourt. And he lectured mathematics of finance, bank management, and insurance in this university. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, I want to say that by virtue of his lecture of today, we can claim that he also lectured in the University of Benin, City. Even though his lecture is going to be for 1 or 2 hours, but he was a lecturer in the University of Benin. Since becoming governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Mr. Emefiele has vigorously pursued his vision of financial system stability and development financing in view of his strong belief that central banks in developing countries cannot afford to sit idly by and concentrate only on price and monetary stability, given the enormity of their developmental challenges. He tackled the effects of the significant drop in commodity prices, the end of the U.S. first quantitative easing program, the peaceful electioneering of Nigeria's 2015 general elections, and smooth transition of political power, the unwinding of unconventional monetary policies by the United States Federal Reserve and other major central banks around the world, the effects of the Ebola crisis in West Africa, as well as numerous other unforeseen challenges. He's currently leading monetary policy efforts to deal with the spillovers from the sharp drop in commodity prices in the Nigerian economy and the effect of the recent vote by the United Kingdom to exit the European Union, an event that is also known as Brexit. These efforts have culminated in the economy's recovery from a recession and a rapid accretion to the Nigerian's foreign exchange reserves, which currently stands at about $45.3 billion as at May 8, 2019. The country has also recorded a reduction in inflation for 26 consecutive months. In recent times, Governor Emefiele has also backed up his pledge to assist with job creation with the establishment of the CBN's Anchor Borrowers Program, a program that has been largely responsible for the significant rice output across the country. Other than rice, the Anchor Borers program has been extended to a range of other agri-products like maize, cassava, palm oil, soya beans, tomatoes, to mention a few. This program is also anchored on Governor Emefiele's belief that the welfare of ordinary Nigerians must be a key anchor of monetary policies and central banking in Nigeria. As handsome as our guest lecturer is, as accomplished as he is, although he controls the vote to Nigeria's treasury, he is not available. This is because he's happily married with children. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, it is this exceptional Nigerian, a banker par excellence, a doyen of the banking industry, the ever-watchful sentry, custodian and protector of the banking sector in Nigeria, a man with inspirational accomplishments, a multiple award winner of different honors, including CEO of the year 2013, a commander of the Order of the Niger, a man without doubt has etched his name into the sparsely occupied hall of men of integrity and honor in Nigeria. The man for whom I had a revelation is likely to put something into Uniben in the not distant future by way of investment. As he did in his university alma mater, University of Nigeria, Nsukka. Since he is of the original Bengal extraction, His Excellency, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, the Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, that I now humbly present to give his lecture in the third of the Eminent Lecture Series of the University of Benin, titled Beyond the Global Financial Crisis, Monetary Policy Under Uncertainty. His Excellency, sir.
Your Excellency, the Executive Governor of Edo State, my friend and brother, Godwin Obaseki, the Vice Chancellor, University of Benin, Professor Orumwense, other distinguished members of the Senate, the Deputy Vice Chancellors, the deans of faculties and heads of departments, the other very important members of the University Executive Council, my colleagues from the Central Bank of Nigeria, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I thank you so much, and I really thank the orator for those kind words. It is indeed an honor and privilege to participate at this eminent person's lecture series. My participation today reflects part of the Central Bank of Nigeria's effort at promoting research and collaboration with universities towards developing policies and programs that will enhance the economic well-being of all Nigerians. The topic of my lecture today, Beyond the Global Financial Crisis, Monetary Policy Under Global Uncertainty, is quite apt given the evolving role of monetary policy following the global financial crisis of 2008 and 2009. And in this lecture, I hope to dwell on how the crisis that beset Nigeria, the world, and Nigeria inclusive has helped to reshape monetary policy tools used by central banks in order to address downturns in their economies. Prior to the crisis, the emerging consensus among key central banks across the globe was an emphasis on price and monetary stability. That is, what you will normally find central bank authorities, governors, and chairmen of Feds talk about is price and monetary stability. This is because it is believed that a focus on price stability would ultimately help to reduce uncertainty on the direction of price of goods and services, and this clarity will encourage businesses to make informed decisions that will support improved economic growth. A critical tool that was used at that time to achieve this objective was adjustments to the monetary policy rate, which is the interest rate at which banks could borrow funds or lend funds from central banks. By adjusting rates, central banks could influence rates on loans that support consumer spending, acquisition of homes and investments by businesses. These loans could in turn support improved economic output and by extension the growth of an economy. Let me take us to the global crisis between 2008 and 2009. As some of you may know, the global financial crisis, which is often referred to as the biggest threat to the global economy since the Great Depression of the 1930s, was triggered by the housing price bubble in the United States between 2002 and 2007. The resulting collapse in house prices in 2008 led to rising default in subprime mortgage loans, and financial institutions which held significant portions of mortgage-related securities suffered sizable losses. The crisis was heightened by the vulnerabilities in the U.S. financial system, which had encouraged excessive debt trading by borrowers, poor risk assessment of borrowers, as well as the use of exotic financial instruments purchased by financial institutions such as credit default swaps. Another challenge which led to financial contagion in the U.S. and other advanced economies was the fact that these mortgage-backed securities and complex instruments were traded across different organizations in different parts of the world. These challenges create considerable uncertainty in the global financial markets and led to a freeze in credit availability, along with the failure of several banks in the United States and in other advanced economies. As a result, the US economy and countries in the Euro area recorded strong negative growth rates, and they fell into a recession between 2008 and 2009. In the US, gross domestic product fell by more than 5% between 2008 and 2009. The Standard & Poor's stock market index plummeted by over 50%, and US unemployment rate doubled from 5 to 10%. In emerging market economies like Nigeria, China, and India, growth remained strong between 2008 and 2009, although lower than growth rates or historical growth rates, say in 2007, due to a slowdown in global trade as a result of the financial crisis. In Nigeria, we witnessed considerable outflow of funds from stock exchange as foreign investors divested of their assets. The oil share index dropped by over 67% between 2008 and March 2009. Commercial banks also experienced liquidity shortfalls as foreign credit lines dried up. This led to a rise in interest rates and a corresponding depreciation of our currency from 117 naira to the dollar to 135 naira to the dollar by December 2008. How did central banks respond? The response of the monetary authorities in the United States and the European Union was an unprecedented deployment of demand-side adjustment policies. The US Fed, from 2007, began to adjust its monetary policy rate, and by December 2008, it had been reduced to 0%, just to stimulate growth. This measure failed to support the recovery of the economy. The Fed in 2009 then resorted to large-scale assets purchases, which is often referred to as quantitative easing, in order to reduce long-term debt lending rates. This action, which increased the Fed's balance sheet by over $2 trillion, led to an improved flow of credit to the US economy, and subsequently, the rebound of the US economy from recession in June 2009. The euro area was also plagued by its own crisis, contagion from the global financial crisis, along with a debt crisis involving countries such as Greece, Portugal, and Spain, led to subdued growth between 2009 and 2012. The Eurozone fell back into a recession in 2012, and the European Central Bank deployed a wide variety of measures to stimulate growth. Part of these measures include a move to a zero lower bound on interest rates. These measures were not effective, and it led to European Central Bank introducing its own quantitative easing program in March 2015 to contain the continuous decline in gross domestic product growth in that area. With over $3 trillion spent buying up mostly government debt and securities, its quantitative easing program led to a rise in economic growth in the euro area, even though growth still remains fragile. What was our own experience? While the impact of the global financial crisis had little effect on the Nigerian economy, the drop in commodity prices between 2014 and 2016 brought to the fore the limitation of conventional monetary policy tools. The over 60% drop in crude prices between 2014 and 2016, along with normalization of monetary policy by the Fed Reserve in 2014, imposed severe constraints on the Nigerian economy, given our reliance on crude oil for over 90% of our export earnings and 60% of government revenue. The drop in the supply of foreign exchange led to a hike in inflation, given the pass-through effects of the increase in prices of imported goods on inflation. Inflation surged from 9.4% in November 2015 to 18.55% in January 2017. It also led to a significant drop in the supply of foreign exchange, which led to demand pressures at the foreign exchange market. The exchange rate at the parallel market rose from 200 naira to the dollar in August 2015 to 525 naira to the dollar in January 2016. Our external reserves fell from about 31 billion in April 2015 to $23 billion in October 2016. Manufacturers were also affected, as the drop in the supply of foreign exchange affected their ability to purchase imported inputs that are required in the production process. Rising rates in the US also supported an outflow of funds from the bonds and equities markets. As a result of these factors, the Nigerian economy unfortunately slided into a recession during the second quarter of 2016. The monetary policy authorities, in an effort to contain this crisis, decided to deploy both conventional and unconventional tools in a bid to support continued growth of the Nigerian economy. A simple focus on monetary policy rate would not have been sufficient to get the Nigerian economy out of recession. And I say so confidently. As a result, we focused on addressing some of the structural constraints to growth, part of which had encouraged our dependence on imported items that could be produced in Nigeria. Our intervention programs were deployed to support growth in critical sectors of the economy, such as agriculture and manufacturing, given their immense potential. One example I often give on countries that have been able to harness their human and natural resources is Netherlands. Netherlands is close to half the size of Niger State of Nigeria. Niger State, the whole country, just about half of the size of Niger State in the middle belt part of Nigeria, which is one of Nigeria's 36 states. Yet, Netherlands exported close to $100 billion worth of agricultural-related items in 2018. And the major item that they imported into Nigeria is milk. And I ask myself, a company that originates or that hails from that country has been importing milk into Nigeria for over 60 years before I was born. And I ask myself, truly speaking, what does it take to produce milk? Get a cow, fatten the cow, and withdraw milk, just like women breastfeed their children, right? And you pasteurize it, you can it, and you sell. And that is what for 60 years we have been importing into Nigeria. Over 60 years we've been importing into Nigeria. So the question we ask ourselves should be, should we be producing milk in Nigeria or should we be importing milk into Nigeria? Thank you. Thank you. Netherlands is also the third largest exporter of palm oil in the world. From exporting dairy products, eggs, and vegetables, it earned close to $10 billion in 2018. Nigeria, with its vast arable land, has the ability to earn over $20 billion from cultivating and processing palm oil. For those of us in South-South and Southeast, and I use Edo, Bendel, right? Palm oil, rubber, had always been our mainstay. At that time, in the 50s and 60s, Nigeria was the largest producer and exporter of palm oil in the world, with 40% market share. Today, we are battling to stop the importation of palm oil. But by the special grace of the Almighty, we shall win. Improved growth of the agricultural and manufacturing sectors, and I say we will win because that is what will create jobs. That is how output can grow in our economy. And we have started the journey because in the last 2 months, we have been engaged in discussions with governments from the South-South and the Southeastern part of the country, where we insisted that they had to allocate hundreds of thousands of hectares of land to people who are interested in regrowing and replanting our oil plantation again. And I'm optimistic that in the next 2 years, by the special grace of the Almighty, we can stand tall and begin to say, not only that we have stopped importing palm oil, but we will soon begin to export palm oil again. Improved growth of the agricultural and manufacturing sectors will naturally insulate our economy from volatility in the global markets reduce our reliance on proceeds from the sale of crude oil, as well as stimulate domestic production of goods that can be produced in Nigeria. As a result, we embarked on additional efforts to stimulate the economy. Some of the measures we deployed include, in the area of monetary policy, during this period of the slowdown, the CBN embarked on a cycle of tightening, which culminated in a July 2016 increase in the monetary policy rate from 12 to 14%. This decision was expected to rein in expected inflationary pressures that may result from exchange rate pass-through to domestic prices and ensure that inflation expectations are well anchored. It is also expected to set off increased capital flows to the country, which should improve accretion to our reserves. In the area of conserving foreign exchange, we introduced a demand management approach in order to conserve our reserves and support domestic production of items that can be produced in Nigeria. In this regard, we analyzed our import bill and encouraged manufacturers to consider local options in sourcing their raw materials by restricting access to foreign exchange on some 43 items. 4 of these items alone, including milk, palm oil, constitute over 1 trillion naira of our annual import bill. In the area of risk-based civil supervision, the weakening of the naira following the shift to a more flexible foreign exchange mechanism, along with exposure of several banks to the oil and gas sector, impacted somewhat on the balance sheets of domestic banks. To support the health of the banking system, we took a number of steps, including monitoring compliance of supervised institutions with the foreign exchange management framework that we issued in June 2016 through our risk-based supervision methodology, which also involved reviewing international trade and foreign exchange operations of our local banks. We began the monitoring of the financial positions and performance of our supervised institutions. We also started an aggressive assessment of the risk profile and governance management practices of our banks. And in the event of major deteriorations on any key risk indicator, we engage with affected banks in order to mitigate concerns and shore up their capital base. In the foreign exchange market, in April 2017, we introduced an investors and exporters FX window, which allowed investors and exporters to purchase and sell foreign exchange at prevailing market rates. In addition, exchange management was further liberalized following the approval of the revised guidelines on the foreign exchange in June 2016, and its optionalization on June 20th of 2016. The commencement of this policy guideline introduced the Naira settled OTC, otherwise known as the OTC markets. The future markets enabled investors to hedge their investments and minimize the associated financial risks. In the area of fiscal policy, the fiscal authorities concentrated on examining ways in which fiscal policy could support household consumption and business investments, as these two factors make up more than 85% of Nigeria's GDP by expenditure. In this regard, the federal government budget was readjusted to adequately address priority infrastructure needs that would support improved investments by the private sector. In the area of development finance, the CBN increased its lending to the agricultural and industrial sectors through targeted intervention schemes such as our Anchor Borrower Program, Commercial Agricultural Credit Scheme, and the Real Sector Support Facility. And in particular, we sought to improve domestic supply of 4 goods: rice, fish, sugar, and wheat, which consume over 1.3 trillion annually in our nation's import bill. The Anchor Brewers program, which was launched in November 2015, was designed to build partnership between smallholder farmers and reliable large-scale agro-processors with a view to increasing agricultural output while improving access to credit for farmers. A targeted focus on agriculture and industrial sectors was driven by the vast opportunities for growth in these sectors given our high population. It was also instrumental in taking Nigeria out of the recession. In 2017, over 50% of the contributions to GDP growth came from the agricultural and industrial sectors. These sectors have the ability to absorb the growing labor pool of eligible workers in our effort to build the household consumption needs of our Nigerian populace. What were the outcomes of our unconventional policy measures? After 5 consecutive quarters of negative growth, beginning in the first quarter of 2016, a coordinated approach by the fiscal and monetary authorities supported a rebound in the nation's economy during the second quarter of 2017. The recovery has been driven largely by improved non-oil activities, especially the agricultural sector, which expanded consistently by about 3.5% to 4.3%, reflecting government's effort at diversifying the economy. This was nonetheless reinforced by the pickup in the oil sector as oil prices rallied in 2017. The gradual reorientation of the economic structure towards the agricultural sector reflects the diversification drive of the government, which was supported by the development finance initiatives of the CBN. The recovery has been sustained for 8 consecutive quarters, though fragile. The pace of quarterly growth has improved from 0.5% in the second quarter of 2017 to 2% during the first quarter of 2019. The short-term outlook continued to strengthen the average growth projections of about 2.8% for 2019, up from 1.81% in 2018. On inflation, as a result of the implementation of the tight monetary policy regime, our targeted intervention programs and improved FX flows, inflation consistently declined from its peak of 18.7% in January 2017, and it currently stands at 11.37% for April 2019. In the reserves, the introduction of the investors and exporters window also helped in shoring up our external reserves. The turnover in the investors and exporters FX window has reached over $48 billion since its inception in 2017, and our foreign exchange reserve has hit over $45 billion in April 2019 from $23 billion in October 2016. Nigeria's current stock of external reserves is now able to finance 9 months of import. With improved availability of foreign exchange, the exchange rate at the investors and exporters FX window has remained stable over the past 24 months at an average of $360 naira to the dollar, and the parallel market exchange rate has appreciated from 525 in February 2017 to 360 naira today. In the Anchor Brewers program, the program has helped to bolster agricultural production by removing obstacles faced by smallholder farmers. And we mean smallholder farmers, farmers in our rural communities who have managed to organize themselves into cooperatives. The biggest problem that smallholder farmers and small and medium enterprises have always confronted is access to credit. And we said that we were determined to break the jinx. And we started through our targeted program under the Anchor Brewers program. For instance, on the rice, what did we do? We didn't give them just money. We sourced high-yield rice seedlings. We gave to them. We sourced fertilizer. We gave to them. We sourced the herbicides, and we gave to them. We deployed our development finance officers in various states of the Federation of the Central Bank branches, as well as some extension workers that were provided by the Federal Ministry of Agriculture to assist them in new techniques in rice farming. And what did this do? It ended up increasing the yield per hectare of rice from about 1.5 metric tons to today over 8 tons per hectare. Our farmers today are smiling to the bank. And I can beat my chest and say that we have today begun to see a migration from the urban to rural areas, rather than migration from the rural to the urban centers. We have also improved access to markets for farmers by facilitating greater partnership with agro-processors and industrial firms in the sourcing of raw materials. So far, the program has supported more than 1 million smallholder farmers across the 36 states of Nigeria, cultivating 16 different commodities, over 1.1 million hectares of farmland. It has also supported the creation of over 2.5 million jobs across Nigeria's agricultural value chain. A key emphasis was placed on the improving rice production, given the considerable weight importation of rice had on Nigeria's import bill. This focus has enabled increased production of rice in the country, which has led to net savings of over $800 million in our rice import bill as a result of drastic declines in rice importation. Activities in the industrial sector also witnessed significant improvement between August 2016 and February 2019, as the primary manufacturers index rose from a low of 42% in August 2016 to 57% in April 2019. This development was attributed to sustained supply of foreign exchange and the dogged implementation of our FX restriction on certain items. As a result, we have recorded spectacular improvements in domestic production of most of these items. Conventional monetary policy tools. The global financial crisis, the debt crisis in the euro area, and the drop in commodity prices between 2014 and 16 brought to the fore the weakness of traditional monetary policy tools in curbing financial crisis. It also encouraged policymakers to look beyond the traditional approach to monetary policy as they seek to ensure financial stability and attainment of their growth objectives. The crisis also raised questions about some theoretical relationships, such as the Phillips curve, which depicts an inverse relationship between inflation and unemployment. The long-run relationship between inflation and unemployment has since been challenged with data from the post-crisis era, providing some empirical evidence to that effect. This has stoked issues on how strong central banks should rely on policy response rules, with leading academics and central bankers calling for an alternative approach rooted in institutional knowledge but supported by these models. Unconventional monetary tools. As a result, it has become necessary and imperative for central banks to include additional intermediate objectives that will promote growth, address the stability of the financial system, and provide support against external headwinds. This new approach also calls for targeted interventions that will stimulate lending to productive sectors of the economy, as this will enhance economic growth and reduce unemployment. In addition, increased enforcement of prudential requirements to ensure that the functions of the banking system remain in conformity with the objectives of monetary policy is also paramount. A weak banking system is a robust recipe for financial crisis. Therefore, monetary policy cannot be effectively deployed if the banking system is fragile or fails to comply with prudential requirements. In a globalized world with deregulated capital flows across national borders, the need for increased cooperation amongst policymakers in the post-crisis era cannot be overemphasized. Institutions like the IMF can take the lead in developing a coordinated approach to emerging economic challenges in order to avoid the spillover effects which happen in some emerging market economies. The review of current global uncertainties. Following the drop in commodity prices between 2014 and 2016, the global economy recently has been confronted with a host of other headwinds and uncertainties. And given the impact some of these headwinds could have on financial flows, global trade, as well as the commodities market, unconventional monetary policy measures may be required to contain these spillover effects if these headwinds result in a slowdown in a global growth. Some of these uncertainties include the normalization of monetary policy by the Fed. This measure led to an acute capital flow reversal and increased financial fragilities in emerging markets. In October 2014, the US Fed commenced the tapering of its quantitative easing program in preparation for a more conventional monetary policy tightening cycle. And in an effort to contain rising inflation, the Fed fund rate was raised from 0% to 2.25% by December 2018. This rise in rates resulted in an outflow of funds from emerging markets to the US, and what was also particular about the flow of funds was the vulnerability to emerging market countries that had high external debt, as well as high fiscal and current account deficits. Let me comment on current trade wars. The ongoing trade war between the US and China has resulted in the imposition of tariffs of goods emanating from both countries. If the trade war is not curtailed, it is likely to result in a slowdown in global growth given the sizable weight of these two countries. Global supply chains as well as the demand for commodities could be affected if the trade war results in a slowdown in growth in China and the US. On crude oil markets, the US sanction on crude oil imports from Iran and Venezuela, along with output cuts by the OPEC members, are helping to shape outcomes in the crude oil markets. These measures have helped to shore up oil prices, which has increased from an average of $63 per barrel in February 2019 to over $70 per barrel in May 2019. However, supply constraints are being moderated by rising production in the US, which has seen a surge in production of the shale oil from 9 million barrels in 2017 to over 12 million barrels in 2019. The weak and fragile global growth. With global output growth downgraded to 3.5% in 2019 from 3.7% in 2018, there are suggestions that the expected economic downturn may be much more than initially estimated. With significant uncertainties brewing around the advanced economies that are expected to lead its growth, output is in this group of countries were downgraded from 2.3% to 2% in 2019, following persistent fragilities from key advanced economies. Now, let's look at Nigeria's monetary policy response to the global uncertainties. In light of the uncertainties on the impact of the various threats to global growth, efforts must be made to insulate the Nigerian economy from the potential effects of a slowdown in global growth or a decline in commodity prices. Some of the suggested measures that both the fiscal and monetary authorities in Nigeria should be considering will be including strengthening our fiscal buffers in order to improve our ability to address potential downturns in the Nigerian economy as a result of a slowdown of global growth. Intensifying efforts at supporting targeted interventions in the agricultural and manufacturing sectors. Given our high population, efforts to support domestic production of goods by farmers, small and medium enterprises, and agro-processors will help our diversification efforts and also insulate the Nigerian economy from volatility in the crude oil markets. Proactive fiscal actions, specifically infrastructure investment, is required to reduce the operational and logistical cost of running businesses. Continued restriction on the importation of items that can be produced in Nigeria and ramping up efforts to curtail smuggling of restricted items into the country would also help. These actions will help to support domestic production of goods in our country. In conclusion, experience has shown that global financial cycles have the potential of amplifying business cycles in emerging and developing markets, thereby posing significant challenges to monetary policy in these economies. Furthermore, strong macroeconomic fundamentals may not be enough to insulate the real economy from the effects of the vagaries of these uncertainties in the global economic and the contagion of poor financial conditions in other emerging economies. Rather, a wider response incorporating a mix of conventional and unconventional monetary policy measures will be needed to combat the multidimensional headwinds emanating from the external shocks and global uncertainties. On our part, we will continue to take a proactive approach in mitigating the likely adverse effects that may emanate from the external headwinds. Policies that enhance production of goods that can be produced in Nigeria, along with measures that improve the stability of the financial system, will continue to be deployed by the CBN. Also important is increased coordination between the monetary and fiscal authorities in deploying measures that will support economic growth and reduce unemployment. Now, the title here says, from beyond the global financial crisis, monetary policy under the global uncertainty. From some of my concluding remarks, you would have observed that whether we like it or not, there is global uncertainty that will unfortunately most certainly trigger another crisis. The question therefore would be, how are we as Nigerians, particularly our leaders, here I'm talking about the monetary and fiscal policy authorities, how are we preparing our country for the next set of crises? We have, luckily, we've exceeded the recession. We've seen inflation trending downwards from about 18.72% in 2017 to about 11.37% today. We've seen reserves moving up. We've seen exchange rate stabilizing. But unfortunately, we still have issues. And those issues border around unemployment rate, and those issues border around how do we prepare our country. And let me repeat myself, because I was in another forum yesterday or the day before yesterday where I was saying this. We were at the IMF meetings in April, just last month. And in part of the reports that were reviewed by the governors of central bank and the ministers of finance all over the world, we were told that Nigeria will be the third largest country by population by the year 2050, behind China and India, and overtaking United States of America. The question, sadly, right? Sadly, Nigeria's population growth rate, annual growth rate, is averaging about 2.7% annually. Nigeria traditionally grows at between 6 to 7%. And that's why I had mentioned in this lecture that our growth, which currently averages about 2%, is fragile because it is still suboptimal and far below the historical levels. I dare say that a lot of work needs to be done. I dare say that Nigerians must rise, because it is only Nigerians that can do it. I was at a function in 2014 in the US, and authorities that were making presentations at those papers, I don't want to mention names specifically, 3 of them had choreographed their speeches. At that meeting, African leaders, governors of central bank, finance ministers, stock exchange leaders had gone to the US, maybe cap in hand, expecting that they will be given money to go and develop their infrastructure. But in all those speeches, while we're talking about collaboration between Nigeria and the United States, the first speaker came and said, after talking about everything that will be done, he said, it is time for us to think about what we can do with Africa, but not for Africa. The second person after 30 minutes came again, addressing a crowd of over 1,000 people in a hall, also spoke and said everything, and came out again and said, it is time for us to think of what we can do with Africa, but not for Africa. And the third person with a very strong oratorial skill, like the orator of the University of Benin, also came up and said, you know what, we are going to light up Africa with $100 billion. But at the end of this all, it is time for us to think of what we can do with Africa, but not for Africa. They had choreographed their speeches. And I told myself, why am I here? It is time to go back home. It is time for me to think about doing it for myself and for my country. Because if we as leaders cannot rise to the challenge in Nigeria to begin to think about how we can do it for ourselves and for our children and grandchildren, I am very sorry that by 2050, some of us may not be able to put on our ties and gowns, sitting comfortably here. It means that a lot of work needs to be done, but we will need everybody's support. Today we hear about farmers that we are supporting not being able to go to the farms because they are being disturbed. I will seize this opportunity to appeal to those who are disturbing those farmers to please give Nigeria a chance. It is only when these farmers are able to go to the farms as a result of our interventions that they can grow food that we need to feed our people. It is only when these people are given the chance to go to the farms to grow our food that they create jobs, not just for themselves, but for others. This food will be processed. Processing those foods will ultimately lead into creating jobs and improving domestic output and productivity. This is what we need for Nigeria. And I would like all of us to rise to the occasion and think of what we can do for our country. I thank you very much for listening.
Please, another round of applause for our eminent lecturer. May we please sit. The question is, what will you do for Nigeria? When we leave here, we will ponder on it and work on it and remember that Nigeria will be great again. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for this wonderful and thought-provoking lecture. Please, another round of applause for our eminent lecturer. It is the tradition of the University of Benin, because when the Vice Chancellor is seated, he believes that every good thing must be appreciated. It is on this note I now want to invite our dear Vice Chancellor, Engineer Professor Osase Faraday Orumwense, Fellow Nigerian Society of Engineers, along with the Registrar of the University, O.A. Oshudi, Mrs., who will officially present a gift from the university to our eminent lecturer, the Vice Chancellor. This lecture is a challenge and it's thought-provoking. The ASU chairman, Professor Julius Yasere, I want to thank you very much. You know you are a lecturer and you always believe that there should be questions. Put them down. When you get to the class, share with the students and then let them challenge Nigeria so that we can make something out of our country. Thank you very much. University of Benin is lucky to have today two governors. One is in charge of Edo State. One has his tentacles spread across the 36 states and the FCT. It is now my pleasure to invite Mr. Governor, who, even with his tight schedule, accompanied our own guest lecturer to this place to be our special guest. The Vice Chancellor will be presenting a gift to His Excellency, Mr. Godwin Norregase Obaseki. Thank you very much. Why were you shouting? Don't worry, madam. You know our governor is is usually addressed as the wait-and-see governor. Before you could close your eyes and open it, the cameramen blocked everywhere. Is that not wait-and-see? We want to sincerely appreciate the governor. He is indeed the governor of Edo State. Our prayer for you is that God will strengthen you and give you the grace to do that which you have been asked to do by the people. They were not there. We went with you to the Edo State Production Center. It was wonderful. When you graduate, for those who are students, don't worry. Jobs are waiting for you in Edo State. If you believe, say amen. May I now invite the chairman organizing committee, the Deputy Vice Chancellor Academic, Professor Michael. For those of you who have been wondering, what is the E in his name? The E in his name is Emefiele. Professor Michael Emefiele as the Ken, DVC Academic, for the vote of thanks.
The Executive Governor of Edo State, Mr. Godwin Obaseki, our guest lecturer for today, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, the Vice Chancellor and the Principal Staff of the University of Benin, the entourage of the guest lecturer of today, all the directors, deputy directors, PAs. In fact, it's as if Central Bank was shut down today. Emeritus professors here present, deans and directors, our dear Senator Weir, Vice Chancellor's wife, I can see you. Ladies and gentlemen, great Uniben students, members of the press. My task this morning is to use my vote to thank them. I'm not using vote to elect now. It's to give the vote of thanks. I want to, first of all, thank God for making this happen. And I want to thank our Vice Chancellor for giving the organizing committee all the support. I can tell you that whatever we were able to put together was done in 2 weeks. When the organizing committee took the idea to the Vice Chancellor that we want to do this, we had some names, but it was not difficult deciding who should be invited among the names we had. And he gave us all the support. Uniben students, give your Vice Chancellor a round of applause. When I wrote the letter to the governor of CBN, that was sometime in January, I thought it was not going to happen. I understand. He's a very busy man. And at times, people like us, you know, we bear the same name now. We work better when we're under pressure. And so, when 2 weeks ago or thereabout, I got a message from them that if accepted, not only accepting, they gave us a date and gave us a topic
I returned a message to the email. I didn't get any reply. I contacted the number that was there, no reply. I called, no answer. I said, can this be a scam? So, we were in management meeting one day. There was this number that had been calling me, a landline. And I'll return text message, it will bounce back. After several calls, I had to leave the management meeting to take the call. And he introduced herself as Mrs. Ikotu. The first thing I asked, I said, do you know Dr. Moses Tule? He said, yes. I said, okay, these are not scammers. And so, if you look at everything that you see here, the cost of this was taken off us. Significant cost of what we are doing now was borne by the lecturer. I want to thank you, sir, for honoring us with your presence and your intellect, because today you have given us intellectual overdose along with practical approaches. So if you look at the problem from the lecture, if you follow the lecture, he demonstrated to us here that the problem of the melanin man, the solution of that problem is within the melanin man and is found on the land where the melanin man stays. So our problem is here, the solution is within us, and the solution is on this land. Let me thank the executive governor of Edo State. I'll tell you something. When the governor of Central Bank accepted our invitation to come, we felt it was statutory to let the Edo State governor know. For once, we will be having two governors in the University of Benin at the same time. It was our own way of using the opportunity to invite Godwin Obaseki here today. Every day, first of all, I thank you, sir. Thank you for coming, and how do they say it? Come again. Now, every day we drive to town. We live in Ubowo. We are in this community. When we drive to town, we see what people wake up and see. The University of Benin is the most cosmopolitan university in Nigeria. If you come to Benin, you will not say this school is south, north, east, or west. We have every segment of the Nigerian society represented in the University of Benin, either as students or staff. So, sir, we want to also wake up and see your presence in the University of Benin. I want to thank our very senior professors here present, Professor Fuebu, Professor Lara is it there, Professor Boka, Professor Vyasu, for taking out time to be with us today. This is the third eminent lecture of a university that started 1970. Eminent lectures are delivered by eminent people to eminent crowd, including eminent students. So my dear students, I thank you all for coming today. In no distant time, we already have a lecture in waiting. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you very much. We want to thank the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academic, for thanking all of us. Our students, you are all wondering if the auditorium can remain like this. Is it not? Everything is what? Possible. If we have two Godwin around, one Godwin will do it. Is it not? Who do you want to? The governor of Edo State, the governor of Central Bank. That is why it's always very difficult for lecturers to mark your scripts. Very clumsy. They already got the message. It is clear. Thank you very much. If you are not aware, the Vice Chancellor has asked me not to say it, but at times when you are with microphone, you are tempted to. The governor has promised that they will fix Ekosodi Road and some other roads. Ekosodi youth, are you here? The message is clear. It is wait and see. Thank you very much. I want to quickly invite His Excellencies to join our Vice Chancellor and the Registrar for a group photograph. All other principal officers will join them. You know, when they introduced the Vice Chancellor's wife, you could see the smile in his face. My Vice Chancellor was very happy. You know, when you marry a beautiful wife, you always want people to know that she's around. Mrs. Orumwense, please, you join them, please. Please, a round of applause for the wife of our Vice Chancellor. As they take their seat, we'll take the Uniben anthem, the second stanza of the national anthem, and thereafter the procession leaves the auditorium before we leave. May we please rise. Uniben anthem. guests will remain standing. The procession leaves the auditorium. We wish to remind our guests and their students that tomorrow we shall be having an inaugural lecture, the 215th in the inaugural lecture series of the University of Benin, to be delivered by the Deputy Vice Chancellor Academic. Time, all guests are to be admin, Deputy Vice Chancellor Administration. Please, all guests are to be seated by 3:30. Thank you.